Good evening. Welcome to Community Technology. We connect the global community with news, information, and resources to hopefully help improve your life. I'm Stu Reid, here with my co-host, Dave Burstein.
Hello.
Hey, Dave, what's going on?
Well, since we do so much network stuff, because that's what we're into and computer stuff, I thought to bring in some different stories.
Okay,
In
go.
particular, auto,
Auto?
auto,
Okay.
automobiles, and
Mhm.
trucks. Uh, the one that adds up to most to being really significant is how fast the sales are going.
Mhm.
BYD, a Chinese company, sold 200,000 electric, mostly hybrid vehicles last month.
Last month? How
Last
many?
month,
Say that again, Dave. How many?
200,000.
Wow.
They're way ahead. They're ahead of Tesla, and they'll probably do about 4 million next year.
Mm-hmm.
That's still smaller than GM or Mercedes and so on, but it's getting up to the kind of scale they really need. 100,000 of the trucks, of the cars that BYD is making, are going to go to European rental company Sixt. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, SIXT. Uh, and that's going to be their toehold into Europe. They're hoping that people driving the rental cars will decide that's a decent car to buy for them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those cars and Teslas are $30,000 to $70,000, mostly not at the bottom end. But there is a bottom end. 12,000 cars, small, compact four-seater, sold last month at Leap Motor, a Chinese company I never heard of. And why did they sell? $11,000. It's got a 250-mile range. It
Wow.
has a lot. Yeah.
Wow. You
Well,
can't buy a gasoline powered car for $11,000 these days. I mean, that's an incredible price.
you probably can in China.
Okay.
Remember, China has more competition than we do, so
Mm-hmm.
prices are lower. And they have more, and even the middle class Chinese are way behind middle class Americans. The per capita in China is about a quarter of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to come up with small ones. But this one is actually not so bad. It's called, where was this part? I'm sorry.
And the name of the car company is Leap, L-E-A-P?
Leap Motor.
Uh-huh.
And it has voice controls,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
uh, made by a company in China that is currently on the US blockade list.
Uh-oh.
It also has a slew of, uh, it has, you can unlock the door with your face
Hmm.
and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that's happening.
So, Dave, does that car have any chance of being imported over here, or because it's on the blockade, it sounds like you said?
That particular one isn't going to come here anytime soon,
Mm-hmm.
but they're going to go heavily into Europe, uh, and they're obviously going to sell very hard,
Mm-hmm.
or all over the south, the global south.
Mm-hmm.
They won't get into India, but they'll be strong in places like Malaysia and Thailand, and probably Egypt and South Africa. But that was why the fact that they sold 100,000 to European rental cars was saying they're ready. Now they have the volume, they have the products, they're
Mm-hmm.
working, they're working just fine. They're competing with Tesla. BYD is outselling Tesla at this point. Uh, they're ready to come to the rest of the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Now the
that's
question,
amazing. And you said 250 miles. That's a pretty good range.
well, how often do you drive more than 250 miles before you get home and could plug it in?
Well, never on a day-to-day basis. Only when I take a trip. I occasionally take trips to DC, and that's just around 250 miles. But
Yeah.
otherwise, 100 miles a day would be a lot for me.
Well, yeah. And for most of us,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the but the problem, there's still lots of problems to be solved. One of which is where you charge up.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands of charging stations are coming, but nearly, I don't know of one here in Manhattan. And there's a whole lot of people living in Manhattan apartment buildings who don't have any way to plug in their car.
Hmm.
There is a simple solution to that problem. In Paris, where I was a few months ago on the block where we stayed, there were chargers on the sidewalk connecting to cars that you park there and charge overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And that would probably be a very smart thing for the city of New York to start doing, because that gives New Yorkers more choice.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of more choice, let me come back to networks because it's right on there and it's a low price thing. It's good news for once. Verizon has jumped into the $30 ACP with the federal subsidy.
Mm-hmm.
Something like 40 million households qualify. You can be up to twice the poverty limit or happen to go to school in a district that has a lot of people getting free school lunches and so on. It's a good program. What Verizon just did is they agreed to sell all their services except the DSL for the $30 a month. They're advertising it as free internet. And that really is. Now that includes about 2/3 of New York, Jenny's building, but not mine, where you can get Verizon Fios, and they give you 300 megs up and 300 megs down, which is more than enough for anybody, even heavy downloaders.
Mm-hmm.
On wireless, Verizon is now building out their 5G. This is not their high-end 5G that can give you a real gigabit. It's the mid-range, like what gives me 400 megabits on my T-Mobile. And Verizon is now over 100,000 homes being covered. They hope to get close to 200,000 by the end of the year, which means there's a good chance they cover you. It's not likely to work that well in a Manhattan apartment, putting in a box from Verizon, although it might. And it'll certainly be much better than the DSL that Verizon is still selling to 1/3 of New York. Well, when you think of Queens or Staten Island, which don't have that many high rises, it probably works just fine.
Mm-hmm.
It may not get you the 300 downstream, which they talk about as an up to speed. They don't guarantee it to you, but it should get more than 100 megabits to probably 3/4 of New York City. And again, it is a $30 service, which means it's free if you qualify for the ACP. Verizon did something good as part of this. They are not cutting off after 2 years. One of the biggest unreported stories in telecom is that Charter, which is the old Time Warner Cable here.
Yeah, Spectrum here in New York City.
Now they call it Spectrum or Charter.
Mm-hmm.
Cut you off from the $30 service after 2 years, just an introductory order.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that in Spectrum territory, more than half of New York, I believe, the ACP subsidy will not be enough for free service 2 years after you sign up. That's a crock.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working on a petition that we can put through ISOC New York. May I give a little more ISOC news?
Yeah, can you hang on 1 second, Dave? Let me just background noise here. 1 second. Okay, so you have some ISOC news, Internet Society news. Yes, Dave?
Internet Society in New York has done 2 things. One, we took a position in charge of Gigi Sohn, who's been nominated for the fifth position on the FCC, and the Republicans and a few Democrats who are for sale to companies like Comcast are holding it back. And that's a pity. I've known Gigi for 15 years. She's the best of the best, very strong, smart, well-informed consumer advocate, which is exactly why companies like Comcast don't want her on the FCC. The other thing we did is we joined the NDIA, National Digital Inclusion Alliance, which to my surprise has a very active mailing list with a lot of members all over the country. And it really brought home to me how the feds have held up a sign that said free money here, and are giving $2 billion to people promoting broadband.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, it looks like every state and city and loads of churches want a piece of that. The number of companies or nonprofits going for that money is astounding, and most of them will fail.
Fail to get the money or fail in signing up customers?
Both.
Okay.
And I've been writing for the people in Washington that the things that they can do to find ones that are going to succeed in actually getting people signed up. Stu, you know a lot about that.
Yeah.
How do you get people? Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, how do you get people to sign up? Just making it free turns out not to be enough.
No, I mean it's not. I mean the digital divide is not that simple. Absolutely, pricing is a big hurdle, but over and above that, it's all about value and relevancy. And so many folks that don't have the internet don't understand why they even need the internet. And if they had it, how would they use it? How would it meaningfully impact their lives? So, our group, Digital Divide Partners and Smart Community Initiative, have done a lot of work working with residents in public housing to help develop applications and services that work on the broadband that actually solve problems for people. And when you present solutions that utilize the broadband, it makes a lot more sense for people. There's so many things. We've got a streaming radio service that works on the internet that enables residents to go on the air, produce their own shows, talk about issues of concern to them, utilizing streaming technology that works on the internet. We've got.
Let me interrupt you quickly.
Yeah.
I visited the headquarters. Is it still where it was near 125th Street?
Yeah, Grand Houses. Yeah.
Which are in Grand Houses, which provided a room for this. And when I was there, they were having a panel show with three people actually from Grant Houses talking about the things that were needed by Grant Houses. That's local coverage that matters. Now, what about reaching the people? Who are the people who don't have internet now, and what will it take to persuade them to get it, beside making it affordable or free?
Well, again, I think it's, offering them services and applications, not just the internet, but services and applications that ride on the internet that really have some value and utility to them. And when you're able to show folks, look, this is something you can do with the service, then it's a lot more meaningful. Excuse me. We have something we call our virtual tenant patrol service, which enables residents to monitor their own public space, to monitor and take control of their own public safety. And that's a service that rides on the internet. And many seniors really love that service. And many of them will not otherwise even be thinking about the internet. But when they see that, oh, okay, that's a meaningful service. So it's that kind of stuff that you got to put in front of people, and not just put in front of them, but you really need to engage folks and have them tell you what they need, what their problems are, and figure out ways to utilize the broadband to meet their needs to solve their problems. When you do that, they become a partner in the whole solution, and they really get engaged in a way that just dropping free service on them can't do.
The other thing I'm seeing as I'm on this mailing list, which are people around the country looking for that money, is they have no idea how to communicate with the people they need to reach. It's not that they're not qualified teachers, social workers, PhDs. It's that the people who don't have internet are overwhelmingly poor. Most of them are older. Many of them don't speak English. And many of them can't even read. There's still a fair amount of people in the United States who can't read. We found that out in the broadband plan, where the number was upwards of 5% of the US can't read. And what I hear from the people who are looking to get all the money, and probably will, is sensible questions about, do you want to teach word processing and Excel or just Excel? And use the Excel as an entryway to get people jobs in business. That's all to the point. But none of them asking the question, how do we find somebody who knows how to talk to the kind of people we're trying to reach? Who overwhelmingly is going to be somebody from the community, not the politician appointed to run the statewide office by the governor.
And not the outside experts. The real experts are the people in the community that need the service. Those are the experts. And until those folks are involved in the outreach and the delivery of services, I think you're going to see a lot of failures all across the board.
We've had two people who are PhDs talking about it, John Horrigan, and I forget the name of the woman from Washington, talking about what they need. They both said the same thing I did just now, that you have to have the community playing a lead role, not just answering a survey of what they need, but taking a lead role. Now, people like John Horrigan, who's been working on ending the digital divide for more than a decade, has a PhD, you certainly want to listen to. There's a lot of wisdom there. In fact, it was John who pointed out to me that many people are not taking the internet in various test programs, even when it's free. So yes, we need to get it down to affordable, and free is the most affordable you can get, but you have to go beyond that. And he had solid data about that. And that's something that you definitely want to listen to if you're going to be doing a program. But even more, you have to listen to the people who know what are the needs, what are the expectations of the people that you're trying to reach. And there are very few middle-class professionals who can visualize what it is like for somebody living in a housing project, who may have lived there for 30 years, half of whom are unemployed, but half of whom are gainfully employed. We're not, public housing is not this image of welfare queens. Almost everybody there wants to work if they can find a job, and most of them do. And that's something that I'd say 3 out of 4 or 9 out of 10 of the middle-class whites have no idea how many good, solid people who could use the help are out there in public housing and how to talk to them. So you want the experts, you want to listen, you want a curriculum that's good, you want to find good material for people to read, to point them to on the internet. But that doesn't get you close to convincing people to sign up.
Absolutely. And you know, what you're really talking about, Dave, is you know, my big picture look at that is really just the whole attitude of paternalism, where the people and the institutions think that they can, do the studies and come up with solutions that solve the problems of others without actually involving the others, other than just perfunctory surveys, in coming up with the solutions. So until the folks that are impacted by the digital divide are involved in the solutions, just both designing and implementing the solutions, I think we're going to continue to struggle with this.
And there's another struggle coming up that's in the news for us, to change the subject a little. Elon Musk has apparently agreed to buy Twitter. They're still arguing the terms. He's paying more than he wants to. Some big banks are probably going to lose $500 million because they guaranteed Musk his high price. And what will happen then? Do you think he's going to put Donald Trump back on?
I think he will. He has said as much. Now, Trump is saying he doesn't want to go on, but I think that's he's just blowing smoke until he actually can get back on. So I would say emphatically yes. What do you think?
He said it, and there's no reason to doubt it. And it may be right to give the voice to the president of the United States, but then you have to have some really loud voices explaining why much of the stuff he said is abominable and untrue. So we've talked about this often. The same day that Elon Musk decided to go ahead with the Twitter buy, the United Nations came up with a strong paper saying we must eliminate hate speech. I'd love to eliminate hate speech. I don't know how to do it without also at the same time eliminating a whole lot of valid speech, and where to draw the lines and how to make it happen. I don't have the answers to that, but we're seeing two different approaches coming. Stu, which do you think is better? Strong censorship for what we call hate speech or is otherwise offensive. Attacks on Hindus and Muslims are certainly offensive in many countries. Or leaving it wide open, like traditional American free speech, which, except when you're going to call fire in a crowded theater, lets you talk.
Well, Dave, my take on this has evolved over the last 5 years or so, as I've seen, speak for myself, as I've seen more and more abuse of free speech, and seeing the way that the internet and social media in particular can amplify hate speech, and see how the algorithms on so many of the social media platforms pick up and amplify the negativity. I think something needs to be done to curb it. Again, I've come full circle, whereas I know you and I've had this conversation before, about free speech and kind of let things fall where they may. But the internet and social media really has changed the calculus to me, to the point where the algorithm and social media now is the equivalent of yelling fire in a crowded theater. I mean, I think that's a great analogy. So I don't know how to do that, Dave, but I think there's got to be some controls put on there. And it's interesting. The Supreme Court is about to take a look at Section 230 of the Communications Act, which shields the internet social media platforms from liability for hate speech and things that happen as a result of communications on their platforms. And I think that's going to be a fascinating story to follow and see what they come up with. We've got to take a brief break. I want to come back to that and get your thoughts on that after the break. This is Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Autumn in New York, why does it seem so inviting? Autumn in New York, It spells the thrill of first nighting, glittering crowds and shimmering clouds in canyons of steel. They're making me feel I'm home. It's autumn in New York that brings the promise of new love. Autumn in New York is often mingled with pain. Dreamers with empty hands may sigh for exotic lands. It's autumn in New York. It's good to live it again.
Autumn in New York, the gleaming rooftops at sundown. Oh, autumn in New York, it lifts you up when you run down. Yes, jaded ruins and giddy voices who lunch at the Ritz will tell you that it's divine. This autumn in New York.
Okay, we're back in technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid. Dave, you had some other news that we haven't touched on yet.
Well, I wanted to give some good news.
Okay.
Yeah. Dolly, the Incredible Image Program, is now free for your first 100 images, and they give you 15 free every month. Stu, you took a look at some of the things that came out of Dolly. What did you think about it?
I thought it was an amazing technology. It could take an image and it could create an image out of almost thin air. You could speak and ask it to create an image of a salesman in 1900s selling cigars, and somehow it would take a couple. You just throw a couple images in there, and it'll create a whole shebang, if you will, and virtually out of thin air, it would create images of what that might look like, and it's almost kind of scary, Dave. I mean, it's fascinating, but it's scary in that the imagery that it creates looks like it's real photographic images, real imagery, but it's all manufactured by the algorithms. But the algorithms are so powerful that the sky's the limit. So the fact that now it's available to consumers to use, I mean, how does that work? How do people get access to it?
I go to open.ai, which, among other things, got a pile of money from Microsoft and Elon Musk, as donations for what's going to be ultimately a public service outfit. And there you just sign up, and it's wide open. It turns out that it's not out of thin air. We're talking about heavy-duty machine learning by some of the best people in the world who had millions of images for the computer to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're doing with machine learning is the computer looks at millions of images, many of them tagged with what they are, and it learns what is a cigar, what is a Dodge car,
Mm-hmm.
and then they put it together with things to create the image. The next bit, which both Facebook and Google are releasing trial versions of, I don't know how much you can get to use them. They're doing demos already. Can make a short video, like a TikTok video. And if I wanted to make a video of Jenny kicking a football,
Mm-hmm.
I could do it if it had enough pictures of Jenny in the first place. Now,
Wow.
it doesn't have that many pictures of Jenny, but it certainly does have pictures of Native Americans. And if you want a Native American carrying a football, now, who is the greatest athlete of all times by some people's thoughts?
Jim Thorpe.
Yeah, who was a Native American
Mm-hmm.
and was treated abysmally. And we all know what happened in baseball when Jackie Robinson and other people were allowed to play. Things, including people, is very important. You get better results when there are more people to choose from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but we were talking about Section 230, and why don't I ask you to explain it, and then I'll talk about some of the approaches that
Okay.
might help.
Okay. Well, Section 230, it refers to the 1996 Communications Decency Act. Section 230 was intended to protect free expression on the internet by shielding internet companies from liability for much of the content that users post on their platforms. The law also protects the companies from lawsuits from removing content that violates their policies. And there's a particular case that's has wound its way to the Supreme Court. There was a 23-year-old U.S. citizen that was killed in an Islamic State group attack in Paris in 2015. Her family has sued Google, alleging it was partly responsible because it promoted videos and other content that propagated the hate group's message. The question in the case is whether Google is entitled to Section 230 protection or not. So the Supreme Court is about to take a look at that, and I think it's going to have a lot of implications going down the road. What's your reading on it?
My best guess, but this isn't stuff I really know, is they're going to punt on it and come up with a very limited verdict. But we have a lot of right-wingers on the Supreme Court. And the right has been saying, don't censor Donald Trump and don't censor our neo-Nazis either.
Mm-hmm.
And Musk is taking that position that he only wants to censor things where there's a clear case, possibly with a judge involved, which means it's not going to be effective at all because there are not enough judges on earth to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other things, including one you mentioned. How do you get 17 million followers on Twitter? Answer: most people who do are promoted by Twitter. When you go to Twitter, there's a thing on your right, consider subscribing to. And now they're mostly keeping it instant, like movie stars. But I remember Barack Obama was up, and I bet Donald Trump was up at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a case where the service is taking an active role in promoting things. Even more important is something like Facebook. When you go to Facebook, Stu, which I don't do very often, I don't know if you do.
No, not very often. Nope.
Well, I can tell from my experience the few times I go that I've almost never on my news feed seen any right-wing stuff. Maybe once every 3 or 4 months, somebody that I connected to in the industry puts something that is totally opposite to my views there. And I'm perfectly fine with that. But what Facebook tries to do is it says, what are you like? what do people like you respond to, and put that for you there. So what that's doing is very effectively giving you the kinds of opinions you already have made extreme. Because how do they measure effectiveness? Something that gets clicked on a lot by people like you. And extreme statements are far more likely to get clicked on. Should that be limited? I don't have any answers on any of this.
Well, you know, I think you're hitting on it, David. It's the devil is in the algorithms, and what they look for and what they promote and how they multiply and amplify. And I don't know how you regulate the algorithm, and can you regulate the algorithm? But I think that's really where the pedal meets the metal.
And there's strong stuff being approved at the European Union. They've got a pile of proposals on the table, and I think some of which are going through to make rules about things like that. But even more surprising, the White House came out with a relatively bland statement about the abuse of artificial intelligence, but making clear that these are big issues.
Mm-hmm.
I had a chance to see a friend that I know who was in the White House now, and I've known him for years. And I watch a lot of what's going on there. It's clear to me that while Joe Biden does not get everything right, there are lots of criticisms, and that people making decisions, giving out the $40 billion of broadband money, are going to waste half of it, but that the people that have been hired at the FTC and the FCC and the White House staff up to the level of the National Security Council are honorable, decent people who try to do the right thing. Now that's true whether you're right winger or left winger. And many of the people who were appointed by George Bush, for example, were right wingers, but they were honest ones. And Kevin Martin actually supported net neutrality, made rules on that in 2007. And he was a right winger who, in fact, had got his job because he helped elect Bush in Florida as a lawyer. So I welcome anybody of good faith. I discount people I know have lost track of what the truth is, which happens to a lot of people on both the right and the left. I mean, I come from a world where some of the people I knew supported Joseph Stalin until the end. It's not just right wingers who can't see reality. So I'm very glad, but there's no reason not to give his name because it was a public meeting and then to see that Tim Wu maintained his integrity, even though he's in a very senior and political position in the White House.
Well, what did he and the administration say, Dave? What is their what are they putting forward?
I'll have to put that off till next week.
Okay.
I don't have it in front of me. I haven't looked at it much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. I wanted to ask you about Google is about to come out with an announcement. I'm not sure if it's still under cloak and dagger or not, but there's a secret high-speed telecom project called Elyria that Google has been working on, that some information has kind of trickled out into the media about. Do you know anything about
The
it?
announcement's supposed to be Monday.
Okay.
Its first use, and they already have a $9 million contract, is by the U.S. Department of Defense.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing things like using lasers that can be totally focused from the satellite to the Jeep that they're trying to communicate with, and are hence almost impossible for the other side to intercept. And there's a whole lot of other things they're doing to have signals that will be very hard to read and intercept. You can understand why the Defense Department might like that. And you can understand why a whole lot of other people might welcome it. Google's developed this over the while, but inside Google, there's been a revolt about some of the work they do. Same thing is happening at Facebook. And because there are many people there who don't like supporting the US Immigrations and Custom Enforcement Bureau, which is getting a whole lot of data from all the phone companies to track people. And if you happen to come across the border from Mexico and go to Chicago, they may send some, and they see dozens of people going to the same places in Chicago. They may decide, and AT&T has that data, Verizon has that data. They may decide, oh, that must be a plant that's hiring illegal immigrants. Let's go send in the immigration cops. If you worked for Google, would you be comfortable with your company supplying that?
Absolutely
a lot of
not.
people, and a lot of people inside Google. So I suspect this is why they're putting it off into a new subsidiary that they will not have majority ownership, according to the news reports, but will keep 40% of the profits or something like that. In order to move Defense Department contracts, at least some of them, outside of the main Google. And I think that's why they're doing this. I mean, yeah, it's good to have a dedicated company that can raise some extra cash and so on. They're doing it with Mobileye, which makes their driver's assistance program. But I think they're doing it to isolate Google from what its technology allows them to make money from. And Google is more ethical on this kind of stuff than most other companies, for right or wrong.
Ethical, yet still they figured out how to do the unethical. They just move it over into another company. So,
well, that's what this one looks like. But we don't have enough facts to say, but that's the kind of thing to watch for. Now, Google was just caught with clear violations of privacy law. Android has been tracking you even when you turn off tracking.
Really?
Yeah.
You turn off tracking on your phone and you're still being tracked.
Yeah. Now, when you're working with a phone, you almost have to track it. If you're the phone company, you have to know what tower to connect them to.
Yeah.
And if you happen to be Google who gives driving directions, they need to track you. But they said they weren't. And the state of Arizona went to court, and Google has just agreed to pay $85 million to the state of Arizona for the violation of people's privacy. Arizona is maybe 2% of the United States. If that holds true in other jurisdictions, we're talking billions. Do you think it's right to fine Google billions on something like this?
I think, that's the only way that it might have some impact. I mean, what are they worth? I think we're talking before the show, they're worth almost $1 trillion. That's 1,000 billion. So until you bite into them significantly, you're just talking about giving them a spanking for bad behavior.
Let me get the number on that. Why don't you introduce the next story meanwhile?
Okay. Well, I did want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Iran. There's a lot of media coverage about the protests that are erupted as a result of the death of a young 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman named Masha Amini, who was arrested and held in custody because her head covering was loose and not as tightly covering her head as the authorities thought it should be. Died in custody. Witnesses say she was beaten. The authorities say she had a heart attack. But there are now riots and demonstrations all over the country. And one of the reasons I'm talking about it is because there's the hacking group, or as it's called, hacktivist group Anonymous, are organizing online to orchestrate cyber attacks on Iranian officials and institutions to help folks bypass internet censorship, which has been reinstated and apparently is pretty heavy and intrusive at this point, really limiting Iranians' access to information and ability to communicate. So Anonymous and others are stepping up their game, helping people find VPNs that they can use to work around the internet blockage and attacking. They're doing some denial of service attacks on some of the Iranian institutions, overloading their websites and essentially shutting them down, and things like that to help the Iranian people figure out a way to, use the communication technology to keep themselves informed. So, 150 some people have been killed already just around this particular issue. And, it's gotten a lot of attention, obviously, in the world media. And I think it's interesting, this whole term hacktivist, Dave. What's your thinking about the ethics of hacktivists that use hacking as an offensive weapon, a political weapon, if you will, against so-called oppressive regimes?
Hacking to get information? I have some friends who've done that. We know about Abu Ghraib in Iraq and many, many abuses of power, because there are people who think who have cracked into the security apparatus and got the facts.
Mm-hmm.
Activism that tries to destroy somebody else? Well, the US government is very big on that. There are some anonymous stuff, but the main users of offensive hacking are the United States and the Soviet Union, with a fair amount from places like Ukraine and North Korea. It probably is a mistake because it doesn't work very well. You can deal with most of it, and it's escalating the Cold War and the war against the Muslim world that has been getting stronger and stronger for the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my take, but you may very well disagree with me.
Well, I've got a lot of questions. To me, the whole thing is just not black and white at all. The whole anti-terrorism that sometimes is used, often used as a mask to cover anti-Islam and to mask promoting U.S. interests per se. So I got a big question there, and additionally, just using information technology offensively. I mean that's a scary proposition, Dave, because that can, you think about where that can go, and if you have enough resources like governments do, you can really wield that as an incredible weapon, both externally and, God forbid, internally on your own citizens. So, I can't support it. To answer your short answer to your question.
Did I talk on the air yet about shooting down Elon Musk's satellites?
No, you didn't. But listen, we got just a couple minutes left. I'd like to hear about it.
Okay. The U.S. government, they first presented it as Elon Musk, out of the goodness of heart, was giving millions of dollars of satellite terminals to Ukraine. Mm-hmm. It turns out nothing, that was just a lie. He lies a lot, unfortunately. He's brilliant at running things, but he lies a lot. And the US government had paid for all of them. They're being used on the battlefield routinely because it's not that hard to knock out the usual radio transmissions that a country like Ukraine would have. That's why we mentioned before that the United States government is giving $9 million to Google for what looks like a tight laser beam communication system. Mm-hmm. So Muska satellites are being used actively as a weapon in war. Should the Soviets, if they can, knock some of them out of the sky? There's no law and no precedent about what one does in most of space. There's some laws of space, but they're thoroughly arbitrary. And on something like this, they're not clear. Until recently, it wasn't practical to knock a satellite out, even the ones in low Earth orbit, like SpaceX. There have been some trials by both the United States and the Soviet Union on knocking out satellites so that, for example, the Soviets could knock out the spy satellites that are over the Soviet Union, keeping track of every military base in the Soviet Union. Hasn't happened yet, and I suspect the technology isn't mature enough to do most of it. But pretty soon, that's going to be a real issue.
Mm.
And how to decide it and who decides it? Well, I don't think they're going to leave it to consensus at the International Telecommunications Union of the United Nations.
Pretty unlikely. Pretty unlikely.
Even if an American fairly conservative just took it over.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Well, you know, that's interesting, Dave, because I mean, to me, that just escalates warfare into a whole nother arena that really, I think it's going to be hard to control once folks enter that arena. I don't know how you draw the line or where, if you can hold the line on any of that. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Just finishing up something we've just been talking about. The value of Google's parent company, Alphabet, is currently $1.228 trillion.
That's a lot of money.
It's very hard. I had to come to understand because of what I'm reporting. I'm reporting on people like AT&T who have a $20 billion capital budget and 200,000 employees.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand what that means took me years to get a sense of what that scale could be. Apple is 2.34 trillion.
That's 6 times the 20 billion.
No. That's 6,000 times. No, it's 600 times.
Okay.
600 times 20 billion. And I know it was really hard for me to get a sense of what 20 billion amounted to and the kind of power it gave.
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft, who we think of from Windows, also has a lot of corporate software. And almost all the big businesses, everybody typing has Microsoft Office. And the server behind it is 1.845 trillion. Amazon is 1.228 trillion. Meta, that's Facebook, is not in that class. It's been close to $1 billion. But for the last few years, it's come down considerably. It's now only 373 billion, or as much as the 2 biggest phone companies in the world put together.
Mm.
And that's the small one of these companies.
Wow.
And when you go up to the level of a Microsoft or Alphabet, they're 5 times the size and 10 times the size of giant companies, dwarfs the AT&Ts and General Motors of the world.
That's stunning, Dave. Gives a whole new meaning to corporate giants. Wow. Okay, well,
and I see it in Washington all the time.
Yeah.
They spend $5 million per lobbyist sometimes, and they get very good ones, and they have a lot of power that way.
Yeah, that's lunch money for them. I mean, come on, that's tip money. That's crazy. All right, Dave. Well, we're about out of time. Any closing thoughts before we sign off?
Saturday at the New York State Office Building, there's going to be a group who will help you sign up for the $30 ACP subsidy. It's very generous. It really works. If your income is less than 50,000 or so for a family, you probably can get free internet from Verizon and many others that are coming to New York City.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Well, thanks, Dave. Okay, this has been Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Stay tuned. Every Wednesday, 5 p.m., more information on technology and how it impacts you. Thanks for tuning in. Good night.